This episode is brought to you by Bubs Naturals. Bubs Naturals is a tribute to former Navy SEAL Glenn Bub Darty, a national hero who laid down his life saving Americans in Benghazi, Libya. Glenn was a best friend to hundreds, people of all walks of life, from ski bums to outdoor enthusiasts, hippies, SEALs, fitness fanatics, and anyone and everyone in between. Glenn's call sign in the Navy was Bub. He stood for self-improvement and was always looking to help others, and that same DNA is woven into the Bubs brand. They donate 10% of all of their profits to charity in Glenn's honor, starting with the Glenn Darty Memorial Foundation. Now, we were lucky enough to have Bubs come in as a partner at our Power Monkey camp, and they were an absolute hit with all the coaches, campers, and staff. We were lucky enough to have a variety of their products to test out, from their collagen protein to their brew coffee, as well as their Hydrate or Die electrolytes. Now, I was an absolute fan of the Hydrate or Die. We are on our feet at camp, constantly teaching, training, learning, playing for an entire week, and I needed something to be able to get me through those days, and the Hydrate or Die was what allowed me to do so, all the way to that last pickleball game at the end of each night. And if you would like to try out some of their product, please be sure to head over to bubsnaturals.com and use the code POWERMONKEY, all one word, all caps, for 20% off. Welcome to the Power Monkey podcast, where we chat with the best in the world of fitness about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host this week being Jordan Samuel, and we are speaking with Shane DeFreitas. Shane has been coaching with us at Power Monkey Camp for over a decade, leading our bar station at camp as well as our backflip breakout sessions. Prior to coaching, Shane was an incredible gymnast himself, having competed for Barbados at the 1996 Olympic Games in Atlanta, and then going on to compete for the University of Iowa at the NCAA level. Shane also has a skill named after him on parallel bars, which is an incredible honor in the sport. We go into what that process looks like, how he developed the skill, and whether or not people are still competing that skill today. Post-gymnastics career, Shane has continued in the sport, coaching both adults and kids. We discuss some of the similarities and differences that come along with coaching both and how he approaches these challenges. We also, of course, take some time to speak about the Paris Olympic Games, some of the highlight moments for both of us as we look back at the games that were just for a few weeks ago. Enjoy. Shane DeFreitas, my man, how you doing, buddy? Great to have you on the podcast today.
Pretty good. Happy to be here.
We appreciate the time, and the fact that it's taken us this long to get you on is a shame and a problem on our end. But how was your weekend?
All has been good. It's okay. There's lots of good content on the podcast. I don't mind waiting my turn.
Well, we got to give some context to who you are to the gymnastics world. You are known, but to the listeners here, unless they're a camp enthusiast, we want to make sure everyone knows exactly your background. Can you give a little sense of what you did, all of the amazing things that came along with you as a gymnast back in the day?
Sure. I was fortunate that my family moved to the Orlando area of the U.S. when I was about 11 years old. I came from Barbados, where I had some I don't know, introduction to sports in general, some martial arts that gave me some good discipline, and I could do a cartwheel and I believe a dive roll at the time. And when I
Self-taught?
started some of it was self-taught. I have a very ugly handstand walking picture that shows people how they can go from not so good handstand to a pretty good handstand. And that did take my coaches some years to undo, that's for sure. But when I started gymnastics in Florida, it was at Brown's Gymnastics, and the gymnastics world knows that name a lot from the women's, and they've produced some good men's. Basically, we're just fortunate to move 15 minutes away from a high quality facility. I probably took me a week or 2 weeks to be a lifer. I was in the gym, started doing stuff, learning stuff. I was advancing quickly, and you probably couldn't pry me away from the gym. Within weeks of being in there, it was fantastic. It was exciting for me. It was challenging for me. And I just, head down and kept putting in the work because I loved it. I started getting pretty good. Within about 2 years, I caught up with my age group, if you will, because a lot of gymnasts start younger than 11 years old. So by the time I was 13, I was, things like state champion. I was going to regionals, getting good, going to nationals. I was starting to run into some people that we know from camp as well too, like Duke in Florida. And what really happened was that I started sharing places with some of the American kids because I couldn't take places from them. And when guys like Duke and probably yourself were getting on junior national team, and I was doing as well as some of you guys, and kind of like, well, what am I doing? What's my story going to look like here? What's next for me? That's when I started exploring where I was going to compete internationally for. I was born in Barbados, so that was an obvious choice and kind of at the top of the list. My mother is from Canada, and the Canadian system's pretty decent, especially compared to the Barbados system. So that became a road we started to look at as I got older. I decided I felt more like a Barbadian, so I wanted to stay true to that. There were some pros in it that I could compete sooner at lower level international meets, Caribbean games, things like this, whereas the Canadian system might have had more support, things like a national team, training centers, etc. But it probably would have taken me more years to chip through that system and get into international competition experience. So I had a couple things leaning into Barbados, and I decided to stick with that. And I started competing for Barbados. I was able to compete at several world championships. I was able to compete at the 96 Olympics. And not long after that, after about 5 years of work on a skill on parallel bars, I was able to get one named after me. So I'm in the code of points, hopefully forever. And so my two biggest things that I often get asked this question is like, what's more important to you, having a skill named after you or being an Olympian? And they're a tough call because I hold them both in pretty high regard. I'm pretty pleased that I was able to achieve both of those things over the years.
I mean,
I
those
have
are
a
both
question for you,
legendary
Shane.
status. Yeah, go ahead in there, Jordan.
Your skill named after you, the DeFreitas,
Yes.
what is that worth in the code of points?
Good question. So around the time when I was working on that skill, they had E-level skills. I think they might have had a few F-level skills at the time. Um, my skill ended up with a D level valuation. And so, A, B, C, D. The couple of skills that, like gymnastic skills go, you tend to combine, or people add a flip or add a twist to them. They float around that value as well too. And so while I was learning those C's and D level skills, uh, becoming a better elite level gymnast is when I conceptualized the skill. And like I said, it took about 5 years to go from concept to completion, and then successfully doing it at world championships.
When was the last time you attempted and completed that skill?
Attempted was like 3 years ago, and completed was about 5 years ago.
Dave, have
So
you
Is
ever
that something
tried the
like a
DeFreitas?
yearly, I'm going to keep doing this every year until I can't move anymore?
it's not quite one of those. I'll do backflips and handstands until I can't move anymore. The crux of the skill was the kipping out of it or swinging out of it without a large deduction. And I'm not gonna lie, even when I was competing it, that was still tricky. So I don't ever expect to be able to do it without a large deduction on that skill again. Just going up over the top, doing the meat and potatoes of the skill. That's cool. I think I'll be able to do that for a little while still.
Dave, have you ever tried doing the DeFreitas?
No, I haven't. I mean, when I was competing, it was a fairly new skill, right? Shane, what was the year that you
Yep.
unveiled it?
99.
Okay, so 99. So I was 19. I was kind of in the prime of like just my after finishing my freshman year. Um, I did not try it, and actually, we talked a little bit about this, Jordan, prior to the conversation. Is one, D level skills are not easy. Like for the listeners out there that um, especially if you've been to a course or you've heard me talk about our code of points, just to give some perspective. Shane mentioned, but our skills are rated from an A level skill, which is our most basic, which is rated at 1/10. It has a value of 1/10, which is
Yeah.
added to your total score, all the way up, and every letter scale gets added another 10. So a B is 2/10, a C is 3/10. Shane's level skills worth 4/10 of a point. And now the skills go all the way up to J level skills. So the sport has continuously evolved and it's getting harder and harder and harder. But D-level skills, just for some perspective out there, and I always mention this and I always get some chuckle in a course, but an iron cross, which is an incredibly challenging skill in our code of points. It took me, Shane, I don't know how long it took you to learn one, but I didn't learn one until I was, 19, till I was sophomore in college. It's a B-level skill. It's worth 2/10. It's probably the hardest B-level skill that we had in our code of points, but it's incredibly challenging. So take that in consideration when Shane is talking about a D-level skill and whether or not you're going to perform it and then perform it well. But Shane's skill was kind of unique, and you asked me beforehand, hey, does John Roethlisberger, one of the owners of Power Monkey Camp, have any skills? And John has a bunch of skills named after him. And I think it was a similar path to skill creation. And sometimes it's because it's just kind of an iteration of a previous skill that happens, like you mentioned, maybe another half turn or another flip or how, 3/4 of a flip, whatever it might be, to kind of increase incrementally that skill, or from a tuck to a pike to a layout to increase the difficulty in terms of body position. But sometimes people get creative, right? And they say, I had this idea of a skill that I want to try. Or in some cases, and I know Roethlisberger will be the first to tell you this, is I wasn't able to do the skills that everybody else was doing when it comes to like a dismount on parallel bars or high bar, that I needed to make something up that kind of fit my body type and fit the way that I moved. I'm curious from your perspective, and I know I've heard you talk about this, but what kind of category would you say you were in terms of your skill development? Was it an iteration of something else? Was it because you had trouble in another area, or was it because I want to be creative here?
Straight up mistake. failure. So the skills, and I remember that about Roethlisberger as well too, is that like he had some crazy stuff out there, and I thought he just liked doing the crazier stuff. But you do hear more of these stories that like a lot of people are getting they're flipping or twisting values, whatever they need to, and they're like, I can't compete with those, or those don't work well for me, and they go somewhere else. Mine was working two skills. One kind of goes from handstand, swings forward, does a full turn up, and that's the Diamondov. And the Healy twirl is, I consider it the reverse of that. And then a gentleman called Makut put the two together, and he went 3/4 up, 3/4 down, back to the middle of the bars. I would go over to the one bar with a little too much and fall over the side and fall over the side. And the way my coach would tell it is, in my angsty teenage years, disgusted at myself, when I would start falling over the side, I knew I was going over, and I would just push myself off to go back to the chalk bucket to get another turn in, And he was like, do you think you can maybe turn intentionally and swing out of it? And it took a lot of weird tweaks and working on it, but it essentially came out from an oops, a repetitive over and over again oops that we then added some intention to it and a lot of hard work and 5-ish years. And next thing you know, you have a skill. I think one of the interesting parts. Yeah, one of the interesting parts for me, I get asked this question now, is like, hey, did anybody just compete it at the Olympics? Which I think is a great question. And Dave and our gymnastics people will know this from the code of points. As the years go on, the people in charge, they sort of tweak the code of points. They'll increase or decrease values. They'll increase or decrease connection bonuses to kind of shape and push the sport in the direction they'd like to see, or fill in holes that are missing. And at the time, we had a connection bonus to kips over the side. And you could either straddle it or in-bar it and up the bonus even more, which is what I did at the time. And they have since removed that bonus, which then means somebody has to learn this skill at a D level, go over the side, kip out of it, and not get their connection bonus. And they're spending their time in other places, working other skills and other connections to make more bonus. So you really don't see the skill anymore. The next quadrennium or a quadrennium in the future, they bring back some connection bonuses, and maybe the skill will get used more again. I don't know.
Yeah, that's such a good point too. And again, just this is kind of like inside baseball, inside gymnastics here. Some information here that the everyday listeners maybe watching the Olympics has no idea about. But one, have you seen another person perform that skill ever?
In competition, no. I have been in facilities where, they're like, oh, you're the guy who created the skill. I've worked on that before. Would you work with me? And that's actually the last time I did it, because I was still able to, and we kind of trained it together about 5 years ago. But no,
Love
I've
it.
never seen it in competition.
That's super unique, right? And same with Roethlisberger. In fact, Roethlisberger, normally, if you ask him about it, he'll like actively tell people not to work on his skills. He'd be like, don't worry, it's a waste of time.
Dead
There are
end
other
skill.
things. And so it's always interesting to hear people's perspective on their own skills. An example of the other extreme is somebody like Raj Bhavsar. Raj was on my team in '08. Incredible superstar of Team USA,
Yeah.
Ohio State gymnast. He created a skill after he was done after '08. He came back in '09 and wanted to put his name in the code.
Yeah.
So he put together a variation of a skill, an upgraded variation of what was a tapelt on parallel bars, which is an underbar skill. And now you will have a hard time finding a parallel bar routine that
Without it.
doesn't have a Bobzar in it.
Yeah.
Almost every parallel bar routine, especially the ones that make it to finals, will have a Bobzar in it. So
Yeah.
you go from somebody that creates a skill that you never see to one that is in the code of points. One, it's because of what you talked about. The skill kind of promotes that type of movement pattern,
Yeah.
but it's also one that, hey, this is worth it for me to do it. It fits in well with my routine. And now almost every guy that's doing a parallel bar routine has a Bobzar in it.
That's it. And I think that skill stuck in my brain so much because I think so many of us watched him do it and get his name on it. And we were like, seriously? How's nobody else come up with this before? It's a very intuitive progression once you see it. But before you saw it, nobody was doing it. I didn't even hear of people thinking about it, training it, nothing. And then, like you said, as soon as he did it, boom, it was like the next thing everybody needed and everyone still uses almost 2 decades later.
Yep.
Dave, were you ever tempted to try to come up with a skill, or was there ever anything on the table you're like, hey, maybe I could make this into something?
Yeah, there was a skill. It's actually since been performed. But I was pretty good at this skill called a peach on parallel bars. So there's tons of different variations of peaches. There's a peach to handstand. There's a peach to one bar. There's a peach to a lot of the variations that Shane was talking about. Peach to one bar to a Healy, peach full,
Yep.
peach half. There's just a ton of different variations. And I was pretty good at a few of them. I had a few in my routine. And one that I was working on that I really liked was a peach to a backflip to catch on the bar, and then a peach to a pike backflip and catch on the bar. And I was working on that quite a bit, and I had made it a few times in training, and it's since been done by, a few of the top parallel bar guys in the world. It's a really intricate, difficult skill to do, and just the way that I did a peach kind of lent itself well to do that skill, but it's not something that the everyday listener would have any idea of. It's actually called a peach basket for a peach basket. Like, what is
That's
why are
why.
these skills named these things? But
So this all makes sense now. It's why everybody calls Dave Peaches at camp. Like I
yeah,
never knew
exactly.
why, but
Yeah,
now we know.
yeah. It's my costume for next camp, skirt included. Um, the Olympics, Shane. Sticking on this topic here. We just came off of an amazing Paris Games. It's still kind of somewhat fresh, especially if you're a gymnast. In your case, you're in the gym often with kids these days. You're coaching at a gym down in Texas. So I'm sure the men's gymnastics community that you're working with is like super vibrant right now, super excited about what happened with the men's team and Ned Rostic now being on Dancing with the Stars and getting a little bit of publicity for the men's side, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But, you having been an Olympian, 96, I'm sure still very close to your heart. Was there anything that stood out to you, either routine wise or, something that maybe the everyday user didn't, listener, watcher did not pick up from this Olympic Games that really stood out? Like, that was awesome. I'd love to be able to make sure that people knew that happened.
I don't know that I had a one moment. And my thoughts that I dwell on when it comes to this, they also piggyback, the pommel horse guy, right? So it's kind of the idea of specialists, and what was gymnastics, especially back in our years and around the turn of the century. It was always a team and an all-arounders game. It was rare to see individuals or event specialists make stuff. And get all the way through. And I thought it was very cool that the US's system, their qualification system and the way they played their numbers and what would make their best team, The fact that for a little while now we've had the World Cup circuit, so that an athlete who say comes from a country or a team that isn't that great and they're not an all-arounder, they could just be an amazing high bar athlete, and go to World Cup, chalk up enough points, and they're going to get into the Olympic Games. And I think that's pretty cool. I think that has been one of the bigger changes in the last few years of the sport of gymnastics that I'm kind of excited to see, because otherwise you had to know and watch things like a world championships here and there to see some of these really amazing athletes that might not make it to the Olympics, and now they have better chances on all the events from weird niche countries, and I think that part's pretty cool. So it kind of piggybacks on the celebrity status that he was getting from his pommel horse work, which is, I think, warranted and very cool. The event of pommel horse is, I think, a lot of gymnasts' nemesis. A lot of gymnastics ties into stuff. A vault is a running, tumbling, floor is tumbling. High bar and P bars swing in a direction that's similar to rings as well too. And pommel horse is just like its own animal. And so I find it's a nemesis for a lot of people. Very cool that someone can get recognition as a pommel horse specialist, essentially, and that we can potentially have even more of that coming in the years to follow.
I agree. I mean, it was the unlikeliest of stories, right? When you had all of these other great guys on the team who have huge followings and that, come from powerhouse programs and, previous years on, world medalist, and Steven was a world champion on pommel horse already in a couple of years ago, so it's not like he doesn't have the accolades to go along with it. But
Sure.
it was great to see that story be the one that hit for men's gymnastics, because I think we needed something to create a little spark for the men's side. The women's
Yeah.
side, if you have Simone and anyone, you're gonna have enough of a spotlight to kind of turn it into primetime television. But it
Yeah.
was great to see the men's side get a little bit of extra love this time around.
Very cool indeed. Yeah, because it can sometimes be many years in between those highlights for the men's team for sure.
And maybe we can give this a little bit of a buzz, but sign your kids up for men's gymnastics. It is an amazing sport.
All of it.
If you have a son out there that's looking for a sport that maybe they don't want to go to the Olympics, maybe they want to become a pommel horse specialist, but it's an amazing starting point to be able to
Yeah.
go on to be better at any other sport that you want to go on to do. It's an amazing foundation. Maybe you'll fall in love with the sport itself, but it's an incredible foundation for all the sports. Go to your local gym, sign up for men's gymnastics. We need the love. We need the support. Maybe it'll be the next Ned Rossi.
Yeah. And I think that's an amazing point, especially as kids are younger. You could have two 6 foot tall parents. You put a younger kid in gymnastics, they develop their motor skills before something like their height, gets away from them and makes them not very prone to something like gymnastics, and they build an amazing foundation. It's one of those things that I think kids of any background, size, etc., lay that foundation. It's a great sport for that. And a lot of kids will move on to other sports with a better start. And I love that. Some of them, like you said, will stay into it and hopefully boost some of the numbers we see in men's gymnastics in the coming years. And that would be fantastic. But I think every kid out there can gain from a session or two in gymnastics for sure.
Agreed. And the parents can as well. And this is where I want to kind of swing the conversation to. You've been teaching with us for, over a decade now, Shane. You've been a part of the
Yeah.
Power Monkey team and family, and you're such an incredible teacher, but also someone that just connects so well with campers and participants and course participants, and you can see that you build relationships with people, and there's a reason why you continue to have such a strong connection with the people that we work with and the team itself. But I'm curious from your perspective what it's like to transition from being so hardcore in the elite gymnastics world, and then transition into not only coaching, because you participated as you were part of a grid league team and you were competing in the CrossFit space for a while, but specifically on the coaching side, has there been something unique or something that maybe you've fallen in love with in terms of working with adults that didn't grow up with gymnastics that has been kind of fun to be able to say, hey, this is a new experience, and maybe something that I scratched that I didn't know needed an itch
Yeah,
that needed to be scratched?
that one.
Yeah.
The interesting part is I find some frustrations, or the frustrations I find in coaching, are usually rooted in a version of motivation and self-drive. And so with children, like we were just saying before, if a kid starts to lose interest in soccer practice after 2 years or 3 years, they don't try as hard, they don't pay as much attention, and that can be very frustrating for a coach. It plays into the team dynamics as well too. And I noticed that's where a lot of my frustrations would usually be rooted in my coaching. And I noticed I didn't have that with adults, because adults don't come if they don't have motivation. If they're going to a CrossFit class and they don't want to be there that day, but they're gung ho other days, they skip that day, or they tend to skip that day. When they come to me or come to a clinic, they're coming because they really want to learn. And so I noticed that as much as I responded well as a coach to high level athletes that were motivated, that's partially how they got there. It wasn't the high level that was most appealing to me. It was the motivation factor that was appealing to me. So if you give me someone who is barely learning how to do a pull-up, or somebody who's walking on their hands for 100 feet, once they're motivated, I find I gel with them very well. So when we teach camps, when we teach clinics, when people go out of their way, they pay their good money, they spend their time, and they come to you, that shows there's a built-in level of motivation. And I find a lot of joy, and my ability to connect with people, I think, comes from where their motivation is. And my joy is definitely there, because you get past some of the hurdles right off the gate, and you can really focus on what needs to be done. And they're listening, and they're taking it seriously, and they're putting in the work. And that's fantastic.
I couldn't agree more. And, for having coached this demographic of people for, close to 15 years now, it's one of the most noticeable things for me too. It's just, they want to be there, and they've found a love in something later in life that they want to kind of continue to work on. And it's very cool to be a part of that journey for them. Now, on the technical side, I want to go through kind of each of the areas where we spend some time and see if maybe we can give some technical information and help to people listening out there. But you're the lead coach. We'll start on bar work, because you're the lead coach for us at the bar station at Power Monkey Camp. You have been for a long time. And after having worked with probably thousands of people over the years, are there really common, maybe there's multiple, but can you give some really common issues that you see kind of across the board? Maybe it's on a bar muscle up. Maybe it's an area, just on how people grip onto the bar or pull strength. Is there something that's a common theme that you're normally saying, in general, if we're working with a group of people, if everyone did this more often, all of their bar work would be better because of it?
Totally. And I think what that comes down to is global body tension. So what we can find is there a pattern of people whose timing is off on kips? Yes. Is there some grip issues that are fairly common? And you get these repeating patterns, and you absolutely address them when you're coaching. But what I've noticed, and I'll tie it back into, I think, the way traditional gymnastics solves the issue, is that we spend so much time doing global tension. Hollow drills, arch drills, you do them at the beginning, you do them at the end, you do them on side stations, that they become so second nature that you no longer have to put complete focus into your global tension. You can focus on the skill at hand. Whereas with our adult athletes that are getting into gymnastics or gymnastic style movements later in life, they can show me some good global tension when we're focused on that. And then when we start to work on some of the nuance of a particular skill, the global tension is not as good as I would like to see it, because their concentration has gone somewhere else. The global tension is still new. The hollow shape is still new. Even if we're talking a couple years into working it, it's still relatively new. Their number of repetitions and hours logged compared to even a gymnast who's spent 2 years working on a hollow and arch. And so you find that they're able to do the arm or the hand or whatever nuance you're coaching them on, and then you get you get a stanky leg kicking out to the side or something funny going on. So I think the global tension and just logging more time, like if you're going to do a quick at-home workout, things like hollows, arches, handstands, there are no equipment necessary. You can do them anytime. You can use them for your warm-up and cool down stuff. I would say that would be the sweet spot I recommend for everybody to hit.
I mean, that's right up our alley, Shane. I mean, I didn't even have to cue you up for this, but essentially what you're saying here is, in line with our phase one of our hierarchy of gymnastics progression that we teach with Empower Monkey is creation of body shapes. You
Yeah.
have to be able to create and maintain the body shape that you need for higher skill development. And that comes from being able to create a strong, all-encompassing core and a mobile body, but to then be able to use that when you're doing a kipping pull-up, a bar muscle up, toes to bar, whatever it might be. So you're calling it global tension. We're calling creation of body shapes. It's the same thing. So
Yeah.
what you're saying, which I think is really important, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to become better at bar work or handstands or ring work, you need to be doing stuff off of the apparatus. You need to be doing things more just with your body weight to be able to make sure you understand how to create the shapes correctly before you can effectively do it once dynamic action is kind of incorporated.
Absolutely.
Amazing. So with regards to that, when you have a group at camp, how do you address that? Is that something you address right away? Is that one of the first things that you normally bring to their attention when you have a group and say we're working together? One of the first things is, hey, we're just going to lay it on the ground. We're going to be aware of what these positions look like and give some recommendations on how to apply it.
Correct. We start with floor work on the hollows and arches, and I took something that I thought was very useful from weightlifting. They tend to break a movement down and repeat segments of it at a time, a 2 or a 3 position lift type deal. And I found good response with that stuff when I was teaching a general, say, fitness class. They responded well to that. But then, I asked them, here, do this entire hollow shape. And I wasn't getting as good of results that way. So I started breaking down piece by piece. And, we're just going to do upper, we're going to do lower, we're going to do this. And you see more of that in the traditional gymnastics world, and you don't see as much of it in the CrossFit world. And so bringing some of that over, I think got much better results, both in the arch and in the hollow, on the ground, uppers, lowers, complete units. I think then the next phase of development for these athletes with it is we're going to ask them to do something that'll feel interesting or complex. And we're going to ask them to keep their midsection and lower in this tension or shape, but then their arms are going to be doing something different and moving in a different pattern. So you get like the pat the head, rub the belly type motor skill coordination. And so with that, the segmenting or the separating of the entire piece, I think becomes very important.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And one of the things that this points to me is teaching kids and teaching adults, as I've learned, as kind of CrossFit has exposed more and more adults to gymnastics, is that you can't use the same coaching methods that you use with kids on adults. Like you have to understand that people's movement patterns are set in stone in a lot of ways and need to be kind of massaged much more than when you're a kid and when you're pliable and when you're basically a ball of clay that don't have patterns that need to be broken down and rebuilt again. And so to be a good coach of adults who are learning gymnastics, I think is very different than being a good coach of kids who are learning gymnastics. And I think it's something that we've been kind of learning and addressing over the years as we've dealt with more and more adults. Would you agree? I mean, you deal with kids on a regular basis. Would you say that you're dealing with adults and kids in a much different way in terms of how you approach things?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that will cross over and work great for both, and there's things that won't work for kids that work great for adults and vice versa. And you do have to, I think, from like a coach's developmental standpoint, when a coach is a good coach, and I know you've mentioned this about your Stanford coach, he could look at you when you walked in the room and he could read what he could get out of you, right? So it's one of the things that whether I'm okay or good at it, I always try and work at. What does this athlete need? Does this athlete need some tough love today? Does this athlete need a break today? And trying to read that, just general demeanor, I think is very important for a coach in any sport to do. And then you take that to the level of how does this adult respond to it? How does this kid respond to it? What, like, do I have to make it into a game with the kids to get some of their buy-in, whereas I just have to show the adults where the end result is coming from. They make more of a logical connection, and then they go down that road more willingly and with enthusiasm on their own.
Yeah, it just takes time, right? And the more you get in front of both adults and kids, the more tools you have in your tool belt to be able to deal with those things.
Yeah.
Dealing with people and working with them in person is also very different than meeting someone for a day or a weekend or a week and being able to say, hey, here's some recommendations without knowing, what it might look like when you come into the gym and you're struggling or you're injured, or you have some other things that are preoccupying your mind and we need to work around those things. So
Yeah.
that's imperative on the coach who's working with people on a regular basis to be able to dive a little deeper and to be able to say, I'm not just writing things on the board, I'm actually using that as a starting point, but then
Yeah.
making adjustments according to what I see as the people come in the door, you know?
Yeah. 100%. And I've noticed some big changes over the years in the way I address that with groups. I've had groups of kids or adults that, writing down a workout and having them be able to see every little nuance that's written into the workout is fantastic for them. And then when I have to call an audible in the middle of workout because their energy level isn't there or there's an injury at play and they don't want to change from what was written in the workout, I've also seen good results from knowing what my plan is and never showing it to people, because then I can make all the audibles I want. The kids know, hey, we're in season right now. We're going to be doing routines. And I might have wanted to do 3 routines. And this kid is on fire today and we're going to do 5. Or this kid can't walk down the beam to save their life. We're going to do 1 or 2. We're going to work some parts and skills and drills. And the coach's audible in that case then doesn't get interference from, but the sheet said 3 or 5 of them, and you run into your plan with the adults and you go to your camps and your clinics, and this clinic is a bunch of like stage 1 newbies, and you got to spend even more time on the basics. And this camp or clinic ends up with 90% level 2 coaches in your group, and they want to know more about spotting than they do about doing, because they can all do it pretty well. And so the coach gets to make that audible and address where the need is in the group on that day. And I think that's a very interesting nuance of coaching that, like you said, as we've coached more adults and kids over the years, it's probably just grown our toolbox even bigger for making those calls on the fly.
You just mentioned something there that I want to get your take on a little bit more aggressively, and it's about spotting. Uh, Spotting to me is one of the great missing pieces for most, not just coaches and owners, but also members out there to be able to expand the tools that they have in their tool belt and how they address and attack new and what might be considered to be scary or challenging or difficult skills. And
Yeah.
so last year I put together a little, not just coaching and information technical course, but spotting specific, and say, these are the skills that we see most often. This is the way that we address to create a safe and comfortable and confident environment for you as a spotter and the person that you're working with adults. And I think it's incredibly valuable. And I tell people all the time that if they can become the best spotter in their gym, that they will become the most highly sought after coach in their gym, because people will trust them to keep them safe. I'm
Yes.
curious from your perspective, where spotting and spotting well kind of falls in your ability to teach well, or the way that you kind of project this to coaches. That does spotting play a big role in becoming a more capable, confident coach, athlete, member?
Yeah, I think the coaching in and of itself, obviously very important. Having certain physical tools in your gym becomes very important. And then the coaches learning how to spot allows, I think, a ramped up learning curve for most of the athletes, right? So, if something might take an athlete 6 months to do with just cueing and programming to build them up, you can reduce that sometimes in half with appropriate spotting. You get patterns that are able to be executed sooner and more often. Something like, say, a ring muscle up, if you can spot that effectively. I've seen athletes that they tell me they've been working on this ring muscle up for 6 months or a year, whatever it may be. They've never had anyone spot them, never had anyone around them that can spot them. And I spot them through 2 or 3 ring muscle ups, and they're knocking out sets of them after that. They just weren't aware of what was needed, what the positions and the timing were. And you could almost look at some of these athletes beforehand. You're seeing general motor skill that's there. You're seeing strength and ability in things like, say, your dips and your pull-ups that are going on. They're swinging well on the rings. And you're like, how is this guy not doing a ring muscle up yet? Right. And it's because there was a comfort level that wasn't there. And you're able to fast track some of that comfort level through spotting, things like handstand walking. The degree you shift your center of mass over goes from a balance to a walk to more of a fast walk, and a lot of athletes aren't comfortable with speeding that up. You get a spotter that's there and you can fast track how quickly they learn how to walk properly. I think it's can you do it without spotting? Sure. Does it become faster and more effective with spotting? Absolutely.
I love that. I love that. Something that all people should look more closely into, not just the coaches, not just the owners, members too. Working
Yep.
in groups too, to me, is a huge missed opportunity. At any gym out there, you're going to the gym and you're normally working with the same people. That's a
Yeah.
huge advantage that needs to be taken into consideration when it comes to, we're not just here getting our sweat on together. It's an opportunity for us to become better by saying, okay, we're comfortable with each other. We're here with each other each day. Let's learn how to spot each other through this a little bit more confidently so that we can, like you said, fast track those movements. So opportunity that I think every member out there can actually take advantage of.
And it's pretty interesting. The sport of CrossFit, I think one of the reasons I was drawn to it is because they had some gymnastics movements, some stuff I knew. They had some other challenging movements I hadn't really ever snatched before, and I found it a high skill level that appealed to me. Spotting is another skill, right? People are going to start spotting. Some people will take to it very naturally. Some people will struggle with it a little bit, but it can be developed just like any of these other movements that are there, right? And you learn how to coordinate yourself. You learn how to read and anticipate what an athlete is doing. And by having a version of coaching or spotting under your belt, even as a gym member, it gives you a better understanding of the skills, which should give you better ability to complete them yourself as well.
That's a great point. I want to talk about, I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about something on bars, something on rings, something on handstands, but your comment was universal. Your comment about global tension basically applies to all of those things. So instead of kind of going through those, I'd like you to, it was a question that we got on our IG feed not that long ago that I'd love to get your take on. It was a question around someone who can do a bar muscle up no problem, but
Okay.
struggles a ton on ring muscle ups,
Okay.
and they can't figure out why. So I'm curious if you might be able to give your perspective on why that this might be the case. That, even though they're both called muscle ups,
Sure.
why might there be some sticking points around, for some
One
people,
versus the other.
bar is a little bit easier than a ring, and for other people, ring might be easier than a bar. Can you give some perspective on why that might be the case?
Sure. And I like that initially you phrased the question one way, but I find you run into people that, one becomes easier initially for them than the other. Then we'll talk about what the numbers might look like once somebody can do both becomes
Mhm.
interesting as well, too. When I have an athlete that can do a ring muscle up, but not a bar muscle up, it is usually someone who, let's just say, can grunt through. There's a certain strength or dynamic that they can just pull themselves through and grunt through it. And when they do that on the bar is essentially in the way. And when I have an athlete that is on the bar and able to do bar muscle ups, but is struggling with their ring muscle ups, they usually have a certain skill timing nuance that's more innate or that they've learned faster or better. And they can find themselves around the bar with that timing or nuance more easily. The bar itself is more stable. When they go to the rings, there might just be a bit of the stability or strength missing, whereas they probably have the skill or nuance timing there or can learn it if they haven't spent the time yet. So I usually find a little bit stronger of an athlete will tend to be getting the ring one first. One that can manipulate skill or timing better seems to get the bar one first. Now, once an athlete has both of those, and then they're looking at, say, volume, you usually have a much higher number on the bar than you do on the ring. So an athlete that can, say, do a crazy like 20 set on rings can usually do, say, a 25 set on bar because the bar itself is more stable and doesn't take as much energy once you know what you're doing to a small degree, and the reps are usually higher on the bar.
Yeah, I just to build on that a little bit. the bar too, there's a rest point, right? So for a lot of people, I was watching a competition over the weekend. A buddy of mine just had put up a video of him along the line of a rig with everybody doing bar muscle ups. And there's a point when you're exhausted, you do your pull, you sit up, and a lot of times people will just rest their torso on the bar. They'll
Yeah.
just sit for a second, catch their breath, shake their arms out. Even if it's subtle, you can't really do that on rings. There's no real moment to be able to not have your muscles firing, especially, that those shoulders and those pull muscles and the things that are helping you support, that you
Yeah.
have the opportunity on bar to be able to give a moment of relaxation and reset that
Yeah.
allow you to kind of increase those sets a little bit more that you can't have on rings. The other thing that stands out to me that you mentioned is on rings, normally the person's a little bit stronger. I like to think of it as a little bit stronger in the catch, in like the
Okay.
bottom of the dip, because that's normally the failure point. If your pull is good, your pull has to be a little stronger on the bar because you have to get over the bar, right?
Over it.
You
Right.
you mentioned timing being a component, which is absolutely the case. But you have to have a strong enough pull to get over the bar. On rings, you can have a weaker pull. You were calling it grunt work, right? A
Yeah.
weaker pull, but if your dip is really strong and you can finish in a really low position, that's where that grunt work comes in and you can complete the movement because your dip is strong enough to be able to work through a very low catch, a very low bottom position there. But you don't want to
Yeah.
have to rely on that. So I normally
No.
say that if someone's weak on a ring muscle up, it's normally because we need to be working a little bit more on the bottom part of that dip. We need to get a little stronger in that support position in the catch so that they feel comfortable and confident in what it's going to be like, especially under fatigue. Ring is very different to me than bar. Just because they have muscle up in the name does not mean that they're going to be trained or learned evenly. And I think it's really important for people to understand that. And on top of that, just another little side note, a kipping muscle up and a strict muscle up are both called muscle ups because the CrossFit world has decided to call them both muscle ups, but they are completely different movements. They are
Yeah.
completely different movements.
Yeah.
Um, and I think people kind of get this interpretation that, hey, if I can do one, I can do the other. No, not necessarily. And so we need to make sure we understand, what does a dynamic action look like? How do we take advantage of a swing to create efficiency? Use strength only in cases where we need to so that we can allow ourselves to do these for high volume. But I always a little bit of a pet peeve be like, oh, it's a muscle up. Muscle up is a muscle up is a muscle up. And it's like, that's not the case.
No.
On rings, from your perspective, what are the main differences between a strict muscle up and a kipping muscle up?
Again, you just said it as well too, is a lot of the swing dynamic there, right? You can get someone who is strong and pulls through a ring muscle up. Let's get back to that. The bottom of the dip position that you were talking about, when you go through a strict ring muscle up and you get to the bottom of the ring dip, you're essentially at a pretty static point. The rings themselves are not static, but there's no big momentum, there's no big swing happening there. When you kip and you've got a big swing and you turn over, the turnover part then becomes a lot easier, in my opinion, because you're redirecting that fluid movement, but the rings are less stable. Like, that's one of the things I focus on when an athlete is learning a kipping ring muscle up, is I want them safe in that catch, because those rings are going to want to move all over the place. And a strict one, they almost aren't moving in comparison, right? So I
Wait,
think
wait.
that's one of the bigger.
Absolutely. And I don't want you to jump off that point too quickly. When you are trying to address that issue of using
Yeah.
dynamic action and people not being stable in the bottom part of the dip, how do you address it? I want to
I
see if
have them spending more time in the bottom of the rings. I have them going under fatigue. I have them paused in dips. And then I have them on low rings doing different versions of essentially a pull to stand. There are some call it jumping ones that then create a little bit of a dynamic motion, even though your feet could be on the ground or just off of the ground. You can recreate the swinging momentum without going, 10 feet up in the air where it becomes a potential safety issue. You're working it down low on the ground, and those stabilizers are kicking in. The athletes are learning how that feels and how it adjusts, and they become a lot safer, in my opinion, after that work.
you mentioned earlier, not only spotting techniques and things like that, but introducing new apparatus to people too, for ways to be able to address certain skills and certain progressions. And one of the things that I love addressing, and we do it at Power Monkey Camp at the ring station itself, is introducing static apparatus to help build positional awareness
Yep.
before they take it to something dynamic. And it's the apparatus where you have your skill named after yourself, Shane. Parallel bars.
That's
Parallel
right.
bars to me is a complete missed opportunity from most people because they're big, they're bulky, they cost a lot of money, and people are like, I'm never going to be able to put a set of parallel bars in my gym. You don't need a set of parallel bars in your gym to be able to get the value out of what static apparatus can do. So if you have dip bars, if you have a set of boxes, if you do have a set of parallel bars, use them. But in your mind, are static apparatus kind of a missing link or a piece of apparatus that you would envision being a tool for a lot of people who are struggling in the bottom part or in the support position on something like rings?
Absolutely. And so the same way someone might go from a general push-up that might be on boxes, chest elevated until they're strong enough to go horizontal, and then we might find ourselves in a handstand push-up one day. The same thing happens with your general stability as well too. So let's take that dip position. You start on boxes. I personally like boxes with a dumbbell on top of them or something that can mimic that sort of grab that you would have on the parallel bars. If you do have those, you can work your dips there. You've got matadors in a few gyms. A lot of those are fairly common. And I have athletes actually turn the opposite way. They instinctively face in, and I have them turn the other way because the matadors go out a little bit. And we love that turnout on the rings. So we get the athlete strong and stable on the static equipment, and then we go to something that's moving more. And I have athletes do ring push-ups, feet low, feet slightly elevated, as well as normal holds. I have athletes do tuck and L holds on the rings because no matter how well I try and teach them a ring muscle up, we're going to get some tucking and some piking happen. We're going to have legs in front. We're going to have some movement. And when I teach them how to do that, let's call it at an in-between stage of holding a support and then to a tuck, we're teaching them how to move while on an unstable object, creating the full spectrum from completely stable on the ground, pushing dips, etc., parallettes, matadors, whatever boxes you might have, all the way to the ring supports, pushing, and who knows, one day maybe we'll have some good ring handstand push-ups again.
Ooh, it's gonna be a while before that happens. I still have it seared in my memory of being in the the tennis stadium watching ring muscle ups in Carson and being like, oh my
I
goodness,
remember the whole thing.
they need our help. They need our help.
Yeah,
Opportunity to help. Jordan, you remember when that event was?
I remember. It was
Everyone.
like, hey, you guys are gonna want to make sure you go see this event, and we're both there, like, yes, ring handstand push-ups. And we're like, oh, they're butchering them so bad.
Well, I had never seen so many horizontal ring handstand push-ups before, which was really unique interpretation of what that movement could possibly look like. Yes.
I'm surprised that many of them could get into that deep of an arch. And,
yeah, that was
Shane,
impressive in and of itself.
That's what you meant when you said global body tension, right? It was like a massive arch.
Yeah. They went to a point where they could not be loose anymore. They were at full stretch on that.
Opportunity for us to be able to help them get a little better at it. One day we will get freestanding handstand push-ups on rings. Freestanding handstand push-ups on rings. One day it'll happen. We got camp coming up very soon, Shane, and we're gonna get to see you in person.
Yep.
What are you looking forward to this particular camp? Anything specific?
Oh, yes. There is a big name coming to camp. I'm very excited to get to meet him in person, work with him in general, and just it's kind of cool. Even though I've been in the sport and you've been in the sport and you run into some big names, Fabian is one that's been around for a long time. He has a lot of status with him, and he's been friends with some of you guys now for a while. And it's always nice to hear of a big name athlete that's also a pretty good human as well too. So I'm looking forward to meeting him.
I love it. I was just chatting with him this morning. Shane's talking about Fabian Humbuchen, who will be one of our Power Monkey coaches come Power Monkey Camp 22, which is in a few days, 2 weeks from now. He's four-time Olympian. He's won every medal there's possible. Former world champion in the all-around. He's won a bronze, a silver, a gold. He's Olympic champion on high bar. He is one of the most genuinely kind and generous people you will ever meet in your life. I've been fortunate enough to be friends with him for a number of years now. Spent some time with him and his family out in Germany over the years, and we're
Very
excited to
cool.
have him and his wife Vicky out with us at camp. He's been doing much more courses and things for us over the years, and we're excited to introduce him to the camp family. So I know
Yeah,
you guys are gonna have a lot of good stuff to talk about together.
absolutely.
Yeah. Appreciate the time today, man. This is great. I think we had an awesome discussion, give some good real life things that members and coaches can apply to their gyms, as well
Yep.
as some good technical information about what's going on in the artistic gymnastics world. But before we get you out of here, some quick questions. Hopefully, they'll be easier for you. Ready to go?
Ready.
First one, what sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics?
Gymnastics.
Thank you very much. Checking my bio. This is without service in here too, so I don't get to rub it in his face. But thank you for that one. Number two, any guest that you think would be good for us to have on the podcast? Somebody you've come across recently, somebody that you think might be a good interview.
Ooh. I might have to circle back to you on that one.
You got it. I know it's a difficult one on the spot.
You know what? You're going to have Fabian at camp. What about him? Would he be a good podcast person?
We had Fabian on a little while ago. I don't remember exactly
It was a couple
when,
years
but
ago.
was it?
It was a couple years ago.
But I was thinking about having him back on post Olympics because he does the German broadcast for the Olympics. So he was
He's
in
like
Paris.
the Roethlisberger version
Well,
over in Germany.
yeah, so Roethlisberger does it for NBC, and Justin Spring was also the other commentator for for the USA side. But Fabian does it for like all the German sports, not just
Euros.
for
No.
gymnastics. He does like the commentary for like the entire Olympic spectrum of German sport for the Olympics. So he's
That's very interesting.
yeah, so he's got some interesting perspective on and he does winter and summer too. So the
And
dude's
winter.
the dude is quite the celebrity when it comes to
Huh.
German sports. Yeah. So he'll have a lot to say.
That
Maybe
would
it's
be
worth
a
having him
very
back on.
Yeah, that would be a very cool one to have his perspective on being able to commentate all of the sports, winter as well too. That's crazy.
Yeah, he has some interesting stuff. They make him do all the sports before he commentates on them. So like he's
I'm
had
in.
to
How
do
do I
like
get this job? This sounds fantastic.
I don't know, it's kind of gnarly. He's had to do like ski jumping. He's got to do skeleton. He's had to
I
do
want to
like
do skeleton. That'd be fantastic.
no, he's done some fucking crazy shit, man. But you can
That's
ask him at camp in
awesome.
a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's so cool that he's done them all too.
Yeah, yeah. All right, last question here. If you are a book reader, is there a book that you would recommend that you're reading now or that you've read? If not, a movie or TV show that you've seen recently that's worth checking out.
I am not a book reader. Let's see. I tend to use movies and TV to kind of like shut off and kind of like turn the brain off for like the 20 minutes before going to bed. So things like Modern Family and Big Bang were my go-to ones, and Ted Lasso was one of my favorite newer ones. So
It's great shows. I don't know, Jordan, you're making a face over there. I don't know if you're on board with all those.
I love all those shows. I just rewatched Big Bang Theory and Ted Lasso. I can't be more excited about the announcement of another season.
There's another one coming?
Yeah, they just announced season 4. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I was pretty bummed when it looked like it was just 3 and done.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I want to make this announcement here. I don't know if it's official, but I did see it come across one of my feeds yesterday that Jordan, they're in the works to make, I can't believe I'm saying this, Goonies 2.
What?
With
Yes.
like the same cast as adults?
Yes, 40 years later.
That's awesome.
Oh, it could be epic.
Steven Spielberg is on board.
Will Sloth be there?
Who knows? I mean, Sloth at this point would probably be like 90 years old, but who knows? 40 years later, Sean Astin is signed on, and I think Brolin, and I think they have a majority of the crew already signed on, but there was an announcement that came through. I'm hoping that it's, I don't know. I'm kind of mixed feelings. Of course, I want more Goonies in my life, but
Sure.
I hate when they mess with just absolute classics,
If they
feel
don't
like
do it
if-
right.
I feel like when they start filming it out in the Oregon coast, you're going to be there as many days as you possibly can, try to sneak on set.
I'm already kind of like planning out where I'm going to be staying.
Yeah,
the
you have
Fratelli's
beach house
house.
lined up. Yeah, uh-huh.
The Fratellis.
Well, Shane, thanks again for the time today, buddy. It's great
Thanks,
chatting with
guys.
you and getting a little bit more of the history of your background. We're going to see you soon enough at Power Monkey Camp. For the listeners out there, we got Power Monkey Camp 22. You'll be able to follow along and see all the greatness that we got going on in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee. Camp 23 is also on the books, ready to go. It will be the last week in April, first week of May. You can go to powermonkeycamp.com to find out more information. And please head to our website to check out our Power Monkey training app. If you would like to work with us digitally, it is a great way to work with us on skill development. Thank you again all for listening, and hopefully we'll see you soon in person.